A homeless man asked for leftover soup. Hell's Angels gave him a place to rest. "Please, ma'am, don't throw it out," Leonard Briggs whispered. "I'll take soup from the bottom of the pot, bread crusts, anything warm." It was 4:17 p.m., and he stood at the counter of Brenda's diner with $1.18 pressed flat in his palm, a grease-stained clinic discharge paper folded in his jacket pocket, and the left sole of his brown work shoe peeling loose at the toe. His hands were clean but cracked raw. His faded denim jacket was too thin for late autumn, and the old canvas backpack on his shoulder looked heavier than anything a man should have to carry. He was 62 years old and trying not to beg. Brenda Larkin froze with her towel halfway across the counter because the sign on the glass door said the diner closed in 43 minutes. The shelter intake desk had already stopped taking names at 4 o'clock, and the temperature outside was supposed to drop hard after sunset. Leonard did not look dangerous. He looked finished. Then the bell over the door snapped once. The warm diner air shifted, and a massive shadow fell across the checkered floor as Grady Keller stepped inside, his Hell's Angels leather vest creaking over his broad shoulders like old saddle leather. For one long second, nobody spoke. The low rumble of Grady's Harley still vibrated outside near the curb, fading under the hum of the refrigerator and the soft hiss from the coffee maker behind the counter. He was 59, thick through the chest, with a weathered face, a gray beard cut close to his jaw, old scars across 2 knuckles, and dark tattoos disappearing under the cuffs of his long black shirt. He smelled faintly of engine oil, cold air, worn leather, and burnt coffee. People usually moved out of his way. Leonard did not move at all. He kept his eyes on the coins in his palm, as if looking up might make the whole room judge him faster. His backpack strap was wrapped twice around his right hand, not because he feared anyone would steal it, but because it seemed to be the last thing in the world that still belonged to him. Brenda had seen him twice that week near the post office, walking slowly with that same careful limp, never asking anyone for more than directions. Now he was standing in front of her counter asking for the kind of food most people scraped into a trash bin. Brenda lowered the towel. She was 54, strong-armed from 20 years of lifting coffee pots and carrying plates, with silver beginning to show in her brown hair and tired kindness behind her eyes. She had learned to be careful in a small-town diner, because desperation came in many shapes and not all of them were honest. But Leonard's voice had no angle in it. It only had hunger. "I am not asking for a free meal," Leonard said, his words barely rising above the soft clink of dishes from the kitchen. "Just whatever you were going to toss." He opened his palm a little wider, showing the coins like proof that he still wanted to pay for something, even if it was not enough. His thumb trembled once against the edge of a nickel, and he closed his hand again, ashamed of the shaking. Pride can be a painful thing. Grady stayed near the door at first. He did not interrupt, did not loom over Leonard, did not throw money on the counter like a man trying to buy a moment of attention. He simply watched with that hard, unreadable biker stillness that made strangers nervous and old friends listen. The afternoon light caught the fuel tank of his Harley through the front window, flashing dull silver under the diner sign, while his boots left 2 dark marks of road dust on the tile near the entrance. Brenda glanced toward the kitchen pass-through. A large pot of vegetable soup sat on the back burner, still fresh from the lunch rush, thick with potatoes, carrots, celery, and bits of tomato. It was not leftover garbage, and it was not something she had planned to throw away. But she looked at Leonard's thin jacket, at the worn shoe, at the folded paper sticking from his pocket, and something in her face softened before she could hide it. She knew cold when she saw it. Leonard misunderstood that pause. His shoulders pulled inward, and he gave a small nod, the kind a man gives when he is trying to leave before someone has to say no out loud. "I understand," he murmured. "I should not have bothered you." He started to step back from the counter, slow and careful, as if even retreat had to be done politely. The backpack shifted against his side. Grady took 1 step forward. The leather of his vest creaked again, and Leonard stopped without turning fully around. Brenda looked from the biker to the older man, suddenly unsure whether the room had become safer or more dangerous. Grady's face gave away almost nothing, but his eyes had changed. They were not angry. They were focused. "Hold on," Grady said. The words were low, rough, and calm enough to settle the air instead of breaking it. Leonard turned his head slightly, still wary, still braced for shame. Grady lifted one scarred hand, not close enough to touch him. only enough to show he meant no harm. Then he looked at Brenda. "Make it a real bowl," he said. "Not scraps." Brenda did not argue. She reached for the clean ceramic bowl from the shelf above the coffee station, the larger one she usually saved for truckers passing through on Route 522, and ladled in enough soup to steam over the rim. She added a thick slice of bread, buttered it without asking, and set both down in front of Leonard with quiet care. The smell rose warm and simple, filling the space between hunger and dignity. Leonard stared at the bowl. For a moment, his face did not know what to do with kindness. His pale blue eyes lifted to Brenda first, then to Grady, then back to the food, as if he needed to make sure it would not disappear if he reached for it. "I can pay what I have," he said. Brenda shook her head once. "You keep that." Leonard's mouth tightened, and he swallowed hard. He did not cry, and he did not thank them loudly, because men like him often learn to keep emotion small in public places. He only nodded, pulled the stool back with care, and sat down as if his whole body had been waiting for permission to stop standing. When he wrapped both hands around the bowl, the steam touched his chapped fingers, and his shoulders dropped by half an inch. Grady saw it. He saw the way Leonard did not attack the food, the way he took the first spoonful slowly, almost respectfully, as if warmth had become something sacred. He saw the backpack placed beside the stool, upright and close, the faded canvas patched at one corner with neat black thread. He saw the clinic paper in Leonard's pocket and the careful shame in the man's posture. Grady had seen men fall before. Outside, the Harley ticked as its engine cooled. Inside, Brenda went back to wiping the counter, but her eyes kept returning to Leonard with a concern she no longer tried to hide. Grady moved toward his usual booth in the corner, but he did not sit right away. He stood there under the yellow diner light, broad and silent, rough enough to scare half the room, watching an older man warm his hands around a bowl of soup. He knew this was not only hunger. Leonard ate 3 spoonfuls before anyone spoke again. He did not rush, and that made Brenda watch him even closer, because hungry men usually tried to outrun the shame of being hungry. The clock above the pie case clicked to 4:29 p.m., and the diner would close in 31 minutes. Time was getting small. Brenda slid a paper napkin toward him and poured a cup of coffee without asking. Leonard looked up as if he wanted to refuse it, then saw her face and stopped himself. The coffee was not charity in the way people sometimes made charity feel heavy. It was just there, hot and black, beside the bowl. Grady stayed by the end of the counter, still standing, his broad shoulders cutting a hard shape under the yellow diner lights. The old leather of his Hell's Angels vest creaked when he shifted his weight, and the smell of engine oil and cold road dust clung to him. He noticed things other people missed. Leonard's left shoe was split at the toe, the clinic paper in his pocket had been folded and unfolded too many times, and the man kept his backpack close enough to touch with his knee. Brenda glanced at the glass door, then at the little handwritten note taped beside the register. The shelter intake desk closed at 4 o'clock. She knew it because she had written the number down for 3 different people that month. Leonard saw her eyes move and understood too much too fast. "I can leave before closing," he said quietly. Brenda's hand tightened around the coffee pot. Nobody said that. Leonard gave a small nod anyway, the kind of nod a tired man gives when he is already preparing to disappear. He took another careful spoonful, but his shoulders had pulled inward again. The soup warmed his hands, not his future. He knew the difference. Grady saw that too. Outside, his Harley ticked as the engine cooled near the curb, each small metal sound sharp in the thinning afternoon. The last light caught the fuel tank through the front window and flashed once across the diner floor. Grady looked from the bike to Leonard's thin jacket, then to the darkening street beyond the glass. A motorcycle was no way to carry a freezing man with a bad back. He had a pickup behind the building. Brenda set the coffee pot down. "Leonard, you got somewhere to go tonight?" Leonard did not answer right away. His spoon rested inside the bowl, and the steam curled around his cracked fingers. He looked at the coins still lying near his wrist, all $1.18 of them, then closed his hand over them like he wished he could hide the whole situation in his palm. "I was going to find a doorway out of the wind," he said. No one answered for a moment. A man could say a terrible thing politely, and that made it worse. Grady finally moved. He came closer, but not too close, and took the stool 2 seats down instead of the one right beside Leonard. It was a small choice, but Leonard noticed. So did Brenda. Men who wanted control crowded you. Men who meant respect gave you room. Mind if I sit? Grady asked. Leonard looked at the biker's scarred hands, the heavy rings, the dark tattoos, the hard face that looked carved by road miles and old trouble. Then he looked at the space Grady had left between them. After a second, he nodded once. Grady sat down slowly. Name's Grady Keller. Leonard Briggs, Leonard said, though Grady already knew it. I heard. Leonard looked back into his bowl, embarrassed by that. Grady did not push him. He only rested both hands on the counter and let the silence breathe, the way men do when they know words can make a proud person feel cornered. Brenda poured Grady another coffee and stepped back without being asked. The diner had gone quiet enough for the refrigerator hum to sound loud. Grady waited until Leonard had finished half the bowl. He had learned a long time ago that a man with an empty stomach could not carry a hard conversation. Leonard ate slowly, wiped his mouth with the napkin, and kept one hand near the backpack strap. The patched canvas never left his reach. It was his last fence. You from Harmony Ridge? Grady asked. Leonard shook his head. Not from here. Been here a little while. Working. I was. Leonard's voice stayed calm, but his thumb rubbed the edge of the clinic paper in his pocket. Construction. Framing mostly. Some roofing when I was younger. I could still do clean work, measuring, cutting, repairs. But I fell off a short scaffold in August. Grady did not interrupt. Doctor said it was not the worst fall he had seen, Leonard continued. That was supposed to make me feel lucky. It was 6 feet, maybe 7. Enough to put my back out, and enough to make the crew replace me by Monday. He tried to smile, but it did not stay. Rent did not wait for my back. Brenda looked down at the counter. Leonard took another breath. I had a room over on Calder Street for a while. Nothing fancy. One bed, one lamp, a shower that only worked hot if you turned the handle halfway and prayed. I was behind $386 when the landlord changed the lock. I am not saying he was evil. I am saying I was late. That honesty hit harder than blame. Grady picked up his coffee, but he did not drink. The cup sat in his hand, forgotten. He heard the careful way Leonard told the story, refusing to make himself sound innocent and refusing to make everyone else sound cruel. That kind of pride could keep a man standing. It could also keep him from asking until it was almost too late. How long outside? Grady asked. Leonard looked toward the window. On and off. Mostly off roofs, under awnings, behind the laundromat when the vent is running. I had a spot by the church steps, but they started locking the side gate after someone broke a window. Was not me. I believe you. Leonard turned his head at that, surprised by how quickly Grady said it. I do, Grady said again. Leonard's eyes lowered. The shelter is full most nights. Today I got there at 4:11. Intake closed at 4. He gave a small, tired laugh without humor in it. 11 minutes can be a long distance when your back is bad. Brenda's jaw tightened. Grady saw the way Leonard's left leg shifted under the stool, trying to take pressure off his spine. He saw the man's hands, clean but raw, and the clinic discharge paper with the corners stained dark from grease or rainwater. He saw a worker, not a drifter. He saw a man who had been losing ground one practical detail at a time. Leonard set the spoon down. I am not looking for trouble. Grady leaned back slightly, giving him space again. I know. I do not drink. I do not steal. I do not bother people unless I have to. I know that too. Leonard studied him, wary but listening. How? Grady looked at the backpack. Because you asked for scraps and still tried to pay. The sentence landed quietly. Leonard looked away first. Brenda turned toward the coffee machine, but she was not really looking at it. For a moment, the whole diner seemed to understand something simple and hard. Leonard had not come in looking for rescue. He had come in trying to stay human. Brenda cleared the empty bread plate, moving slower than usual. The diner's last 2 customers had already gone, leaving only a few coffee rings, a half-closed register, and the smell of soup and old fryer oil in the air. Outside, the light had thinned to a dull gray along Route 522. The day was leaving. Grady nodded toward the clinic paper. You need medicine? Leonard touched the folded discharge sheet, but did not pull it out. Ibuprofen mostly. They gave me instructions. Rest, heat, no lifting. That is a funny list when you do not have a place to sit down. Brenda closed her eyes for half a second. Leonard noticed and looked ashamed of making her feel bad. I am sorry. I should not have said all that. You are allowed to say what happened, Brenda said. The words were simple, but they made Leonard go still. He looked at her like she had handed him something more difficult than soup. Permission, maybe, or proof that his story did not make him a burden. Grady watched the exchange and felt an old ache stir under his ribs. Leonard folded the clinic paper smaller and tucked it back into his pocket. I was going to try the church basement, but they have a dinner tonight for the senior group. I did not want to get in the way. Then I thought maybe the bus station restroom, but the deputy checks it after 5:30. He paused. I am running out of places that are not somebody else's problem. Grady looked toward the front window. The cold outside was not dramatic. It was ordinary, which made it more dangerous. It would slide into sleeves, stiffen fingers, turn a bad back worse, and make a proud man keep walking long after he should have stopped. What is in the backpack? Grady asked, gentle enough not to sound like suspicion. Leonard's hand moved to the strap. Socks. 2 shirts. Razor. My union card from years ago. A photograph. He stopped there. Family. My wife. Ellen. She passed 3 years ago. His voice did not break, but it changed. I keep the picture wrapped in a grocery bag so it does not get wet. Brenda looked at the backpack differently after that. Grady did too. Leonard gave a small shrug, as if he regretted saying even that much. That is all. Nothing worth stealing. Grady's eyes stayed on the patched corner of the bag. That is not nothing. Leonard did not answer. The wall clock moved to 4:46 p.m. Brenda's diner would close in 14 minutes, and everyone in the room knew it. Nobody said it out loud. They did not need to. Leonard saw the time, and his shoulders tightened again. He reached for the backpack. Grady spoke before he could stand. Do not go yet. Leonard froze. Grady's voice stayed low. I need to think for a minute. Grady did not look like a man who needed permission to think. He looked like a man who could move through a crowd and make the crowd open around him. But in that moment, he sat very still, one scarred thumb resting against the side of his coffee mug. The old leather vest creaked when he breathed in. His eyes had gone somewhere else. He remembered Evan Keller, his younger brother, a grown man with a restless heart who had lost his footing after bad luck and worse choices. Evan had worked loading docks, then day labor, then whatever paid cash by Friday. He was 37 the last time Grady saw him, thin from stress, laughing too loud, pretending the world had not cornered him yet. Grady had believed the laugh. That mistake never left him. Evan had asked for a little money outside a gas station in Altoona, $27, and a ride across town. Grady gave him the money, gave him advice he had not asked for, and rode away before he had to see how tired his brother really was. 2 weeks later, Evan was gone from the rooming house. No forwarding address. No call. No clean ending. Grady had spent years learning that regret does not always shout. Sometimes it sits behind your ribs and waits for another man to walk in wearing the same exhaustion. Leonard was not Evan. Grady knew that. But the backpack, the careful shame, the way he tried to leave before anyone could reject him, all of it touched the same old bruise. Grady looked at the diner window and saw his own reflection there. Gray beard, hard eyes, biker vest, a man most people judged before he spoke. He had scared plenty of people by accident. Tonight, that could be useful only if he used it gently. There was a spare room behind the club's old repair garage on Calder Road, for miles from the diner. It was not a charity center, not a public shelter, and not something painted up for attention. It was just a clean back room the brothers used when a member got stranded, when a traveling rider needed a couch, or when somebody's truck broke down too late to send them back into the weather. It had a cot, a sink, an old wall heater, and a door that locked from the inside. It was enough for one night. Grady stood. Excuse me a minute. Leonard looked up, uncertain. Did I say something wrong? No, Grady's face softened only a fraction. You said enough. He stepped outside before Leonard could ask what that meant. The cold hit him hard, carrying the smell of wet pavement and hot rubber from his Harley. He pulled his phone from his pocket and made the first call under the diner awning, where the wind could not steal his words. Deke, Grady said when the line opened. I need the back room at the garage ready in 25 minutes. Deke Harlan was 64, retired from towing, and gruff enough to sound angry even when he was helping. Grady told him to turn on the wall heater, check the cot, and put clean sheets on it. Then he called Roman Voss, 51, the only man he trusted to make an old heater behave without kicking it. Roman was told to bring a space heater from the parts office, just in case. No drama, just work. Then Grady called Maria Rodriguez at Harmony Ridge Shelter. He kept his voice level and gave facts, not a sob story. Leonard Briggs, 62, injured back, former construction worker, no intoxication, no threat, needs intake support tomorrow morning. Maria listened, typed, and gave him 9 o'clock. Grady thanked her and ended the call. Through the diner window, he saw Leonard sitting with both hands around the coffee cup, trying to look like a man who was not waiting for his life to be decided. Grady put the phone away. The wind cut under his vest, but he barely felt it. This time, he would not ride away. When Grady came back inside, Brenda had already flipped the sign on the door from open to closed. She had not locked it. That mattered. Leonard noticed the sign first, then the unlocked door, then Grady's face. His grip tightened on the backpack strap. Grady took the stool 2 seats away again. I made a few calls. Leonard's eyes sharpened with caution. Calls to who? 2 men I trust. Both grown, both tired, both useful. Grady gave the smallest hint of a smile. They are getting a room ready. Leonard did not answer. It is behind an old repair garage on Calder Road, Grady continued. Not fancy. A cot, clean sheets, a sink, heat. Door locks from the inside. You can sleep there tonight. No cost. No work asked. No story owed. Brenda stood still behind the counter. Leonard stared at Grady as if he had spoken in another language. Help was one thing. Shelter was another. A locked door, a clean sheet, and heat were not small things to a man who had been measuring sleep by awnings and exhaust vents. I do not understand, Leonard said. Grady nodded once, accepting that. Fair. Why would you do that? Because the shelter closed 11 minutes before you got there. Grady looked at the clinic paper in Leonard's pocket. Because your back is hurt. Because it is going to be cold. Because you asked for soup and still tried to pay. Leonard looked down. Grady did not fill the silence too quickly. He knew pride could bruise if you grabbed it wrong. Tomorrow morning, I can drive you to Maria Rodriguez at the shelter. She said 9 o'clock. She will talk through options. Paperwork, medical follow-up, maybe a work program if your back allows it. I am not promising miracles. Leonard's mouth moved, but no words came. I am promising tonight, Grady said. That was the whole offer. Brenda put a hand flat on the counter, steadying herself. She looked at Leonard with a kind of care that did not ask him to perform gratitude. You can stay here until they call back, honey. Leonard flinched slightly at the kindness, then nodded. Thank you. Grady's phone buzzed at 5:08 p.m. He looked at the screen. Deke had sent a short message. Room ready. Heater works. Roman is leaving extra blanket. Grady showed the message to Leonard, not because he had to, but because proof mattered when life had taught a man to doubt gifts. Leonard read it twice. His voice came out thin. I do not have anything to give you. Grady slid Leonard's $1.18 back toward him. Keep that for breakfast. Leonard's hand hovered over the coins. He did not take them at first. Then, slowly, he closed his fingers around them and held them tight. It was not about the money anymore. It was about being allowed to keep one small piece of himself. Leonard still did not say yes right away. He stared at the counter, at the empty soup bowl, at the coffee cup gone cold in front of him. His face carried the look of a man caught between danger and dignity. Outside, the streetlights clicked on one by one along Route 522. The diner windows turned black enough to reflect the 3 of them back at themselves. Grady waited. Brenda began wiping the same clean spot on the counter, giving Leonard somewhere to look besides her face. That was kindness too. Not every act of mercy needed eye contact. Leonard finally spoke. I have been helped before. Grady nodded. And it cost you something? Sometimes. Leonard swallowed. Sometimes people help so they can remind you later. Sometimes they help so they can feel clean. Sometimes they talk about you like you are not standing there. His fingers tightened around the coins. I am tired of being a lesson. Brenda stopped wiping. Grady looked at Leonard for a long moment. The biker's face stayed hard, but his eyes did not. Then do not be one. Leonard lifted his head. You are a man with a bad back who needs a warm room, Grady said. That is all this has to be. The words settled slowly. Leonard looked toward the door. The night beyond it was dark now, and the wind pushed a dry leaf across the sidewalk in quick little scratches. He imagined another doorway, another stretch of concrete, another hour trying to look invisible while every bone in his back asked to lie down. Then he imagined a cot, clean sheets, a lock, a sink, and silence. His eyes came back to Grady. Is it really just for tonight? If that is all you want. And tomorrow? I drive you to Maria at 9. Grady paused. After that, you decide what help you accept. Leonard breathed in through his nose and let it out slowly. It was not a dramatic sob, not a collapse, not a speech. It was only a tired man letting go of one layer of fear. His shoulders dropped by half an inch, the same way they had when the soup warmed his hands. Yes, he said. Please. Brenda turned away fast, pretending to check the register. Grady only nodded. All right. Leonard looked at the backpack on the floor. I need to keep this with me. Nobody touches your bag. The answer came so quickly that Leonard looked up again. Grady held his gaze. Nobody. That was when Leonard finally believed him. Grady did not put Leonard on the Harley. He knew what the image would look like, the big biker and the fragile man riding into the cold, but images did not matter. Leonard's back mattered. The temperature mattered. Getting him there without pain mattered. My truck is out back, Grady said. Leonard stood carefully, one hand on the counter and one hand gripping the backpack strap. His knees held, but only because he moved like a man who had learned how not to ask his body for too much at once. Brenda came around the counter with a clean paper bag. Inside were 2 wrapped biscuits, a plastic spoon, and a small container of soup. For later, she said. Leonard stared at the bag. You do not have to eat it now, Brenda added. Just take it. He accepted it with both hands. Thank you, ma'am. Brenda gave him a look. Brenda. That almost made him smile. Thank you, Brenda. Grady opened the back door of the diner, leading them through the narrow service hallway that smelled of onions, dish soap, and burnt coffee. His boots sounded heavy on the tile, each step measured so Leonard would not feel rushed. Outside, the air cut colder than before. Grady walked to a black pickup with dull paint, a cracked dashboard, and a folded wool blanket on the passenger seat. He opened the door and moved the blanket aside. Take your time. Leonard climbed in slowly, jaw tight from the effort. Grady did not touch him unless asked. He only stood close enough to catch him if his back gave out. When Leonard was seated, Grady handed him the backpack first, then the paper bag from Brenda. Respect was sometimes just getting the order right. The truck heater coughed twice before it caught. Grady frowned at it like an old enemy. She complains before she works. Leonard looked at him, then gave the faintest laugh. It was small, but it was real. They drove through Harmony Ridge at 5:19 p.m., past the closed pharmacy, the post office where Brenda had seen Leonard earlier that week, and the church with its basement lights glowing for the senior dinner. Leonard watched it all through the window. For the first time that day, he was not calculating where he could hide from wind. He was being taken somewhere on purpose. Grady kept both hands on the wheel. The leather vest creaked every time he turned, and the smell of old hide and engine oil filled the cab. He did not play music. He did not ask for more of Leonard's story. The quiet did enough. For miles later, they turned onto Calder Road. The old repair garage sat behind a chain-link fence, low and square, with a faded sign, a gravel lot, and 2 motorcycles parked under a tin awning. Deke Harlan stood by the side door in a brown work coat, arms crossed against the cold. Roman Voss was tightening something near the wall heater vent with a flashlight clenched between his teeth. Both men were clearly adults. Both looked at Leonard once and then looked away, giving him the mercy of not being stared at. Grady parked close to the door. Ready? Leonard held the backpack against his chest. Yes. The room was smaller than Leonard had imagined, but better than he had allowed himself to hope. A cot stood against the far wall with clean sheets tucked in tight, a gray wool blanket folded at the foot, and a second blanket on the chair beside it. The old wall heater clicked and hummed, pushing steady warmth into the room. On the small sink, someone had left a fresh towel, a bar of soap, and a bottle of water. Leonard stopped in the doorway. Deke cleared his throat from the hall. Heater is holding at 71. Roman tapped the doorframe with 2 knuckles. Window latch sticks, but it locks. Bathroom is across the hall. Light switch is on the left. Grady nodded. Thanks. The 2 men left without making a speech. Their boots faded down the hall. Then the outside door opened and shut. That quiet exit did more for Leonard than a dozen kind words could have done. Nobody crowded him. Nobody watched him break. Grady stepped inside only far enough to point. Door locks from the inside. I will be in the front office for 20 minutes. Then I am heading out. If you need something, knock. If you do not, sleep. Leonard moved toward the cot, as if approaching something fragile. He touched the blanket with 2 fingers. Then he set Brenda's paper bag on the chair, placed the water bottle beside it, and slowly lowered his backpack to the floor near the head of the cot. He let go of the strap. For a second, his hand stayed open in the air, empty and unsure. Then it fell to his side. His face changed in a way Grady could barely name. Not happiness. Not relief exactly. More like a man realizing he did not have to guard everything for one night. Leonard swallowed. First time I have put it down in a while. Grady looked at the backpack, then at him. I figured. Leonard turned toward the sink and washed his hands. The water ran clear, then cloudy, then clear again. He dried them with the towel and stood there a moment, staring at his own palms as if they belonged to someone who might still build things one day. Grady stepped back toward the door. I will pick you up at 8:30. Maria at 9. Leonard nodded. I do not know how to thank you. Rest, Grady said. That is enough. Leonard sat on the edge of the cot. The springs made a small, honest sound under his weight. He took off the damaged shoe first, the one with the peeling sole, and set it neatly beside the other. Even here, even exhausted, he kept order. Then he lay back slowly, protecting his spine, and pulled the blanket over his chest. The room was not a miracle. It did not return his apartment, heal his back, or bring back the life he had before August. But it was warm. It was clean. The door locked. Morning had a plan. That was enough to begin. Grady stood in the doorway for 1 second longer, his massive shadow falling across the hall instead of the room. Then he reached in, pulled the door almost closed, and left Leonard the last few inches to shut it himself. Leonard did. The latch clicked softly. Outside, Grady walked back through the garage, past the smell of oil, rubber, and old metal. His Harley waited under the awning, black tank catching the yellow security light, but he did not start it yet. He stood beside it in the cold, one hand resting on the seat, thinking of Evan, thinking of Leonard, thinking of how a man could look frightening and still choose to be gentle. Inside the back room, Leonard Briggs closed his eyes under a clean blanket, his backpack safe on the floor beside him. For the first time in weeks, he was not guarding the night. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection,